I'm sure if you're listening to this podcast, you care, you work hard. I'm probably preaching to the choir, but the kids today are seeing other kids, unlike our generation, make thousands of dollars by the internet, and the proliferation and the elimination of the middle person who has to decide who gets on the radio or gets to decide to who gets listened to. And so it's a tough subject, right? But we have to tackle it. What are our values? What is money? Do we act arrogant? Are people with money better than people who without money? Did the people with money work harder than the people without money? Those are important questions. And I think that's more of a emotional, spiritual, intellectual, philosophical question that you need to help them answer.
The content presented and discussed is purely intended to be general and educational in nature and should not be construed as specifically tailored investment, financial planning, tax, legal, psychological diagnosis, or other professional advice.
Hello, everyone. Thank you again for being with us. This is our next episode I think this is our fourth episode of our podcast, Ask My Man Manny, and I am the president and founder of Gamma Wealth Management. I'm also a certified financial planner and tax preparer. And so I talk to a lot of families about a number of different subjects. And we also have my co-host here.
Hey, this is Dr. Abby Durkin. I'm the financial behavioral health consultant for Gamma Wealth Management. It's awesome to be here.
Awesome. Today we have a really interesting subject that's kind of dear to my heart. It's children's finances. I have a 15-year-old and a 5-year-old with two unique views of what money means. And I'm sure you do too, Abby. You have a college freshman, right? Or sophomore?
Yeah, he's a sophomore now. He's a teen, super smart. Yep.
Awesome. So yeah, I think you're a part reason, and we're talking about this topic. Tell me your opinion. Tell me what your mind is. What's going on in your mind when you think about this topic?
Yeah, so I was thinking a lot about this week for some reason, and I was thinking about the different stages that kids go through with their own relationship with money, right? And so there's little kids that cannot be more excited to get $1, for their allowance, and they're working through how are they going to spend it, and then there's so much impulsivity around that dollar, right? I want to go to the 7-Eleven and I'm going to buy the first thing I can. And there's zero concept of how far that money goes or what they should do with it. And so, at the very young child age, I think there's opportunities to teach kids about money in a way that's fun, that teaches them maybe in a different kind of way. Like, instead of this instant gratification thing, it could be reframed as this is thanks for your hard work, or this is because, I think you're special, or I was wanting to reward you for some kind of achievement that you've got. And then stepping them through in a way that makes sense based on their developmental level, where maybe for the littler kids, you get that impulse out of the way. You give them, the $1 for the store, and then you give them another $1. Like, once that impulse is met, then you give them a second $1 and say, okay, we're going to do something different with this one. So they don't feel that, sense of, oh my gosh, I'm going to miss out, right? Even little kids have FOMO too. But It got me thinking about the different critical periods in child development where money comes into play. And for some kids, as they get a little bit older, they might be hyper aware of the family finances. Some families have kids that are like little tiny accountants that are like, how much did that cost? And how much money do you make? Right? There's absolutely no filter. And the way that they internalize finances for the family, in some cases, becomes not just a source of curiosity, but for some, it's like an actual concern. And they feel like, oh, I have to know everything, right? So some of these little kids are so anxious about money, and they're not even in middle school. And they're like, oh, no, they have like even a hard time articulating what the anxiety is. But then, of course, as you get into high school, you can have more sophisticated conversations about it. And kids are often, getting their first part-time job and coming face to face with the significant amount of withdrawals that happen before they see that paycheck, right? So I remember when my son had his first job.
Oh yeah, that's good.
Yeah, he was working at this crepe shop, and his first week, he put in so many hours, but it was the first paycheck. And so when that pay stub came in, it was like $20 because he's like, who's FICO? Like, who are all these people? Like, I don't know. Why are they taking my money? And so we had to have another conversation about like, this is going into your Social Security. This is what Social Security is, right? So it didn't really become real to him. Before that, it was super abstract, and he didn't understand all the time, what my personal frustrations were as an adult. And on paper, like my gross income versus my net, he's like, what's that about? So we got to have a lot more interesting conversations about money once he started making his own. But since you are the financial guru, I wanted to get
goodness,
your
that's so funny.
I wanted to get your sense on, kids and money and critical periods, and maybe some ideas that parents could use from little childhood to middle childhood up to high school that, would make some sense.
Oh yeah, so I think there needs to be like 3 different conversations need to be made, right? One is a conversation about what you want that influence to be within your family. The second part, what is the influence outside of your family on their view of money, and then how do you make some kind of adjustment around that? And it's a very touchy subject. We live in a world where once they get to a certain age, your kids are going to be influenced by a lot of different things. Now, whether you want it or not, you can choose for them to not have any social media, them to never watch any TV, or not hang around with certain period. But we're just talking about most teenagers, most adolescents, they're going to get influenced. And we live in a society that treats people with more money better than people who don't. And then we also have this interest to seek some kind of enjoyment, right? So money represents 2 things. It's not really anything but what money buys that people care about. It's what you get from it. And if we get to a point where they're old enough to understand the concept that this money is going to be tangible for them to go do things, I think you have to also experiment, right? So you have to give them opportunities. You got to let them make their choice. Can't make it for them. So I think that's what part of what you were saying, which makes a complete sense, is here's $1 for you to spend, and here's $1 for you to save. This summer, I'm kind of doing the same thing. My daughter, I just got her permit for her first job, and she's gonna be working for me this summer, and she'll be, listening to our chat and responding, and and then confirming appointments, hopefully. And so I told her, like, you're gonna get a paycheck from me, but I'm also want you to start making money and putting money towards a Roth IRA, and maybe I can match it, with our funds. So that's a unique thing to kind of get them to understand, hey, this is real. This is tangible. She's going to have money to spend. And we've also, my wife just took her out to go get a dress, and she's like, oh, I want to get this dress for this to go on this prom. It's not her prom, but somebody else's prom. And she spent a good amount of money for the ticket, and she's budgeting. So, and my wife and I talk about this all the time. It's like, she'll go out, she'll easily spend your money before asking to spend her own money on something.
Absolutely.
So we have to kind of put our foot down and say, look, let them experience the budgeting aspect. Let them understand that, hey, there's going to be some part of this money is going to be saved. Some part of the money is going to be spent, and then lean into it. And me and my wife still have that debate too sometimes. If she comes to me, she's fortunately I spoil her. Like, if she comes to me, she asks me for something, more likely than not, she's going to get it. But when it comes to the real world, there has to be some kind of transition. I, as a teenager, clearly didn't understand how much cars cost. I had this thought when I was going to get my first job. Oh my goodness! Over the summer, I would have saved this amount of money. Then I'm gonna buy a car.
Oh yes,
insurance. My eldest is starting to drive now. And so we have to be honest. And a part of that does come from us being open and honest with them. I sent a message out to LinkedIn once. Hey, at what time do people talk to their kids about money and how much they make? Nobody responded.
Wow.
It's just one of these last taboo conversations we have. Like, we have conversations with our kids about the birds and the bees. We have conversations where adolescents about drinking and using drugs. We have in driving, and then we have our conversation about that. Perhaps maybe we're talking about that now. This generation is more aware of leverage and importance and knowing that at a young age. But we don't talk about our dreams or aspirations and how much it's going to cost them.
Yeah,
that's absurd. I mean, I tell my I don't want to tell my kids how much money I make. Why?
wow.
Why don't you? What is it? What is their lifestyle? And I had at a Girl Scouts badge I did for my wife's troop, where we talked about, all right, how do you hope next 10 years? Where do you want to be? How much is that education going to cost you? What is your paycheck going to look like after you graduate in 4 years? And what is your student loan going to be? And these are kids are 13 to 16. And so you have to be, you can't, I think we have this view like, oh, we need to change something. We need to change something with this generation going into their adult age. And we need to, it starts at home. Like it starts with you being honest and saying like, I don't have everything I need. There's a budget for things.
Yeah.
Mommy and daddy can't do this year because we want to do that next year. So we're going to have to do this now, And so I think we want to live, we put this face on that the kids don't need to know our problems, need to know our challenges, and need to know that there's limits.
Yeah.
But I think we're doing a disservice by not being honest with them.
Yeah. Those are excellent points and super relatable. I'm wondering about if there are strategies that you can recommend, because kids are innocent, pure, and financially illiterate. They're just like come into the world not necessarily understanding things automatically. And so it's up to us to explain things to them in a way that they understand. Have you got any strategies that you maybe used with your daughter that helped her understand savings when she was little? And it doesn't even have to be financial.
Yeah.
Did you teach her or have any success teaching her about how to save things?
Yeah, well, I talked to her a little bit about, and she's my daughter. I bless her. Like I love her to dear, but she does not like money. Money is in investing and finance is what separates my time from her, and work. And so maybe that comes into play with it, and that she looks at it differently because this is my job, and she's already assigned me as doing her taxes for the rest of her adulthood.
Yeah,
but what I would say is what I started off with doing is I did two things. I created a savings account. So she has a savings account and she also has a Cash App account, right? And so she has a little account that she can use, she can manage, and she has a little card and she can do that. And then the other part of it is I created a UTMA account at a discount broker.
Oh, wait, that's a great idea.
And I said to her, and she was probably about 8 or 9 at the time. She was about that age where she can understand, she read, and I can help her understand just the basics of investing. And I said to her, all right, we're going to create this UTMA account. We're going to put a little money into it, and you're going to do the research, and you're going to tell me what stock you want to buy. Let her do it. Like, let him do it. So I would say, all right, think about some of the things that just based, I don't go into technical analysis and bombard them with facts and figures. But this is how stocks work. If you have money for a short-term purpose, you have that if you have short-term needs, that's where that money is there. That's where your savings account, that have a PNC, that little Sesame Place kind of cool thing attached to that. And then I had the UTMA account that I created. And I said to her, all right, look, you're going to think about some of the things that you use that and think about some of the things you care about. And she was all into animals. That was her thing. And so that led her to buy PetMed. And so I told her to monitor and tell me a little bit about what's going on. And then that just kind of I just kind of fell off. So that was kind of it. So all of that money's been in the money that you had in the PetMed for I don't know how many years now. But that's just to get an understanding of a base understanding that there's
that's a great idea.
Short-term needs and there's long-term needs. Short-term needs are for short-term investments, savings, that sort of thing is for short-term needs. Obviously, when I have a certain number of months worth of savings, she can't. Kids deficit spend. So having some of these bigger, let's budget. They don't have anything to budget. I think we spend too much time there. There is just understanding of this is what cash does. This is what investing does. Is enough for those people that kids are just, let's say, under 12, 15 before they start working. Now this summer, she's going to have that moment. I want to video record her when I give her first check. Now, when you have kids, you have minor children going back from like hundreds of years ago. The rule is no payroll taxes. All right. Still have to pay federal and state, but she'll see the sting when she gets the check with withholding.
Yeah.
And then I will immerse her into some of the subjects we're going to be talking, like some of the things that she's going to talk. She's going to have tons of questions. I had an intern last year. She didn't make the cut last year. That's why she didn't work for me last year. But yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited for her. She's just, you got to immerse them into things. Let them decide it. Because if I pushed her and say, I want to do this, and then she would hate it. She would never want to be involved, right? So obviously I could teach her a whole bunch of things, but you don't want to.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So it's really what I think what you're saying is you're going at their own pace.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Now for me, when I was younger, I was self-driven. Yeah, I was driven. Like I was driven to learn everything there was about finance when I was her age. Bought books, looked at investing and filed the market and that sort of thing. That might happen. Maybe she gets bit by the bug and she really gets fascinated about it. Now the thing is, I told her how much we make, how much money we make, and I wanted to sit her down and walk through a tax return.
Yeah,
that's another thing. I think she's old enough to do that. She can do a tax return next. She might have to, not have to, but she might want to. She's going to make enough to get everything.
Yeah, so she's a junior right now, right? And you were saying that this is going to be the first year that she has to do that.
Yeah, and the other part of this is these kids are growing up very, very fast, and we want to talk about the social aspect that they're growing up in. When I was, I guess, in the last generation where we had a corded phone. And we spent a lot of your time outside. We talked to people. We had music videos, right? Music videos glorified this idea of having so much money that you can waste it and not have to work so often. And that's kind of like the general, that's the echelon of our society, right? We want to get to a point where we make the most amount of money that we can waste it on frivolous things and not have to work, right?
Right.
So I'm sure if you're listening to this podcast, you care, you work hard. I'm probably preaching to the choir, but the kids today are seeing other kids, unlike our generation, make thousands of dollars by the internet, and the proliferation and the elimination of the middle person who has to decide who gets on the radio or gets to decide to who gets listened to. And so it's a tough subject, right? But we have to tackle it. What are our values? What is money? Do we act arrogant? Are people with money better than people without money? Did the people with money work harder than the people without money? Those are important questions. And I think that's more of a emotional, spiritual, intellectual, philosophical question that you need to help them answer.
Yeah, I think it's really important to have those kinds of conversations a lot earlier. And that's something which might catch some parents off guard, because in the generations that have come before, like you're saying, we wouldn't have to have specific conversations about extreme wealth with kids. But when we do allow them access to social media, it's everywhere. And even if they don't have social media, like at the full range of options, they still see the news and they still see, YouTubers making crazy amounts of money at a very young age. And if your kids are into gaming or watching streaming games on YouTube, the amount of money that is required to get that off the ground is just mind blowing. And then even within games, for example, you have game coin. and might be a really interesting way to talk to them in a format that they understand is video game money. And how do you budget that, right? So it's a little bit more impulse centered, and it might be an interesting way to talk to them, because if you're playing a game and you see that you need a certain amount of coins or a certain amount of reserves for your health or for your skins or for your weapons, or your player of choice needs some kind of battle ready, awesomeness. I don't know if any parents out there can relate to suddenly seeing a massive dip in their bank account because their kids bought all this stuff through a game that they're playing. It's not real to them. But if that is a way that they are starting to process having their own money, it's more tangible. It's a little bit less abstract because they're in the moment. And those games are not set up to teach them financial literacy. They're set up to empty your wallet, mom and dad. And that's a tough that's a tough conversation to have. But I also really like what you're saying about having your daughter choose stocks that she's into, right? And so when she picked that thing about pets, that's natural interest. That's a really good example of aligning financial literacy with a developmental stage. And if your kids are massively into sports, how much fun would it be for them to own like a penny stock in Adidas or Nike or something like that, where they can feel even more a part of things? Or if they're, whatever their little interest of choice is, if they're into dinosaurs, would they like to own a penny stock in some kind of museum or natural history thing? Or if they're into travel, or if you've got a little fashionista that really is into that kind of thing, own a little penny in fashion, and help them say, okay, this is a natural interest that you have, but how would this serve you in another realm? And it changes the mindset of kids to go from consumer to owner. And it has that happen at a much, much younger age. And I think that might be where we're at socially, is you're either going to be rickrolled and you're going to be like chasing this image, chasing this brand, right?
Yeah, economic education is for everyone. That's what I want my kids to believe in. And I want it to be so much a foundation of what they know that it becomes less important. Because I think really, and there's been this phase about, STEM versus STEAM. And, we need to focus on, there's this clash of war, this thought that there's at odds between capitalism and people who are the doers. And, we're talking about 19th century like debates and these political ideologies that are coming and stratifying our conversations. And I wonder, like, if there was just basic economic education and you didn't get taken advantage of, would you be a better artist? Would you be a better teacher? Would you have more freedom of yourself to be who you are without being taken advantage of? And I think that's partly true. If you're a artist, you have to budget, you have to know those things. You have to, it would be nice to have like a backup plan if things don't work with your actor. Funny things, my daughter wanted to be a biomedical engineer at first, and now she's trending towards going into acting. She's been a lead in a couple plays. And so, yeah, she still needs to budget. She still needs to put money aside. She still needs to invest if she wants to do that. It's not my decision. It's not what I would want. But you can't tell her that. I can't say that. I don't want to be an overbearing parent. The other part of it is realizing there's a values question that there may not be a easier answer for. It's crazy how we grew up with our lead, like going back to the video games. If you're Sonic, what happens if you run out of rings?
Yes. It's curtains for you.
You can get hit at any point in time. Mm-hmm. You get hit any point in time with rings, you're fine. The moment you get hit without any rings, that's when you die.
Yes, exactly.
Mario is collecting coins all the way. And so I think we subconsciously have this view that the end game is there is some kind of end game, and as long as you have enough money, you'll be okay. But reality is, if you do make it, you still have some other things. You're still yourself. More money, not necessarily more money, more problems. More money, same you. And you got to identify something in them. And if they're artists, which is awesome, that's an outlet that doesn't have a answer. Like I love martial arts because there's no final point, right? There's constant improvement every day that you're doing it. And it's a better goal to have than just to seek money for money's sake.
Yeah.
Now, I did play a lot of video games when I was a teenager, and I wish I came back to it. With kids, I got more into the Nintendo. I'm all Nintendo. I have almost every. I've had almost every Nintendo platform since like '85. But with kids, it's always fun to play with them and go back in time. Massive games. I think it was World of Warcraft. I apologize for my ignorance on video games. That's the one where you're like building up skill levels and you're getting money. You're using real money to buy into to get video games.
Yeah.
I could definitely see from an economic standpoint, there's such things. I even looked it up because I would love to retire Nintendo. There's such thing as a video game economist who brings their economy background to games and defines what the prices is and creates systems in it. Yeah, that's a true thing. So if you're a finance geek like me, you're thinking about how do I merge that with video games, that's one thing. You're gonna be a video game economist.
Wow, that's absolutely brilliant.
But the other part of it is, I played Final Fantasy X. I love that game. And I was like 17 that came out, and you had to create skills, and you had to accumulate things and items, and I guess there's some sense in that it helps you understand some level of economic theory.
Yeah, because I think we have to make this concept really kid friendly and speak to them in their language, and their language is their little hyper fixations. What is their interest of the moment, and it's called in psychology, this is called scaffolding. It's where you build a framework or a structure or some kind of cognitive map that your kids can latch onto using things that they are already passionate about. And so if you take something that they're already passionate about, it's a less difficult conversation. You're no longer starting from zero, and you instantly have their interest, right? So when my son was little, he really liked Pokemon, and he also liked Dragon Ball Z, and there was cards to buy. And so that became his motivator. So some of the conversations that we would have, we wouldn't talk about money in concrete terms. We would talk about it in cards. And what do you have to do to get the next card? And how are you going to level up, right? And it kind of worked because money itself is a little bit abstract, right? And we've already moved into this era of blockchain and crypto, where it's even more difficult for people of older generations to loosen their rigid idea of what currency is. But our kids are actually in many ways further ahead in a natural understanding of money being more fluid, more abstract, where we're talking about video game currency, but we're also talking about so many different ways where kids are involved in trading games, and they have this entire little ecosystem and this microeconomy that is in the language of childhood. And so I don't think that, we have to stick with the old traditional model of necessarily, here you get $5 a week if you do your chores. We can really make it a much richer conversation that could serve them much better at later stages in adolescence and young adulthood.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And there's a such thing that I read. I love this book. It's Moonwalking with Einstein.
Ooh.
You ever heard of that?
No,
this guy,
it sounds great.
He goes through the memory Olympics, and he talked about what you're talking about, interconnecting ideas and the way memory works. And he talks about the memory palace.
Yeah.
Where you attach a different number of emotions, multiple number of emotions, and in a linear path to a fixed physical area to a concept. And so, for example, if I was thinking about remembering the planets, the order of the planets, or the number of different levels of the animal kingdom, right? King Philip came over from Germany safely. Right? Well, maybe I didn't have that mnemonic device, but I looked at my childhood home and I said, kingdom in the doorknob. Thought about the doorknob as I approached my childhood home and a smell that I might have. And then I open the door and I get into the vestibule. And right there between that second door, I'm thinking about class and the glass, right? And it sounds stupid and knocking on the glass. It sounds kind of crazy when you think about it. But these people have created these memory palaces with multiple steps where they can remember 5-10 decks of cards in order, you know? And at a basic level, that's where most of education, I think, helps in broadening it and having different experiences in different subjects. You know, it's just a matter of having all these interconnected experiences, immersing them, and then jumbling them all together that keeps the idea and the concepts in your head.
Yeah.
That may not have been exactly what you were talking about.
No, it fits in. It fits in because I think the reality that we're in is we can no longer, well, we can do whatever we want, but we shouldn't be compartmentalizing money and finances as a totally separate conversation. It is more interconnected at the earliest stages of childhood up to adolescence than it's ever been before. So I think as parents, educators, guardians, leaders, we have a responsibility to convey these concepts to the kids and to our young friends that, hey, this is something that is not so abstract, and it is interconnected. It is part of everything that we do. And having those open door conversations that say, okay, it's not just about allowance anymore. It's not just about, getting the money from the paper route or mowing the lawn, but it is pervasive, and using any kind of memory structure like that is really cool because, again, it makes this conversation interesting to kids because you're breaking it out of its false, confined, compartmentalized topic, right? It's no longer is it just going to the bank with mom on a Saturday morning to deposit her paycheck. It is so much more fluid, so much more accessible, even at those early stages. So yeah, I think as parents, we're in for a treat and a bit of a surprise because it's a fluid concept now that shows up in so many ways that we really weren't affected by.
Yeah. And I think I want to end with this one last subject. And I think we really need to kind of talk about it and think about it more specifically. Yes, as the kids become young adults, just run into these situations. We know that life is unfair. And instead of just like knowing that, just saying that, we also kind of understand that there's systems in place that reinforce that unfairness. And so we got to figure out whether or not you're going to be a part of the solution, a part of the problem. I would say get in the habit of working with people who are less fortunate. I think that's helpful. And if that's something that's important for your kids to be, you want that to be a part of your kids' lives, do that too. And if you want them to be rounded individuals, tell them to treat people with lesser means, not unfairly. I think we need to create a society with our next leaders, if they're going to be in leadership positions, to not stereotype people and not mistreat people. There's going to be rewards for people who work hard. There's going to be people who don't work hard for a number of different reasons. And so we can't attach our own value to that. We have to attach it to something else. It has to be attached to values separately, independent of what the world says you are. And that's a balancing act. We want the world to be better, and we have these liberal type of views. I'm leaning liberal. I'm lean center right, or center left, depending on the day you ask me. But I have people who lean center left, but send their kids to private schools, and I have people who support a number of different public institutions, but don't support it for their kids, or want their kids to grow up to do whatever they want to do, as long as they're not artists. You can't have it both ways. And I know as a parent, you want it to be both ways.
Yeah.
It's the way we want them to affect the world. And that's it for me.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Manny. This was so much fun.
And I want to thank everybody for listening in. I hope you got something out of it. And next week, have a good time. Learn something. Be good. All right. Take care.
Bye.
The content presented and discussed is purely intended to be general and educational in nature and should not be construed as specifically tailored investment, financial planning, tax, legal, psychological diagnosis, or other professional advice. Any data cited is valid as of the date of presentation, but please know that such data are frequently subject to change. Any investment performance referenced is purely past performance, which is no guarantee of any future performance. Nothing contained in this course should be construed as an offer to sell, a solicitation of an offer to buy, or a recommendation of any security or other financial product or investment strategy. All investment, tax, and financial planning strategies involve risk that you should be prepared to bear. Investment, financial planning, tax, legal, and other professional advice is specific to each individual and entity, and you are highly encouraged to consult with professionals of your choosing before taking any action based on the contents presented or discussed herein.